The sun rises over the vast plains of Mesopotamia. The Euphrates glitters in the morning light, its waters carving life into the desert sands. Out of this fertile soil, where the first cities of humanity once stood, a name would emerge that would echo across history: Babylon. To some, it was the jewel of the ancient world, a city of wonder and innovation. To others, it was a place of decadence, arrogance, and sin. For nearly 2,000 years, Babylon rose, fell, and rose again, leaving behind ruins, legends, and a legacy that shaped civilization itself. Long before Babylon's mighty walls stood tall, Mesopotamia was already a land of firsts. Here, humanity discovered the power of irrigation, turning rivers into lifelines. Here, writing was born, etched into clay tablets. Here, kings commanded armies, built temples, and proclaimed themselves chosen of the gods. The land between the rivers was the cradle of civilization, and within it, Babylon began as little more than a cluster of villages. It was not destined to remain obscure for long. By the early 18th century BCE, a new power emerged under the rule of a determined king, Hammurabi. He would take Babylon, still a modest city compared to its rivals, and forge it into the heart of an empire. Hammurabi was more than a conqueror, he was a lawgiver. His code, inscribed on stone, remains one of the most famous legal documents in history. It bound the empire together, establishing justice, defining rights and responsibilities, and reminding the people that their king ruled with divine authority. To bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, that the strong may not oppress the weak, Hammurabi's prologue declared. For the first time, the ideals of justice and order were written into stone. Under Hammurabi, Babylon flourished. The city became a hub of trade, connecting distant lands through rivers and caravans. Merchants arrived from the Persian Gulf, from Anatolia, and from the Levant, bringing goods, ideas, and stories. Temples rose, dedicated to Marduk, the city's chief god, and festivals bound people together in shared worship. Babylon was not yet the wonder it would later become, but its foundations were laid. Its name carried weight. Its influence spread far beyond its walls. Yet power in Mesopotamia was always fragile. Empires rose and fell like the ebb and flow of the Euphrates. After Hammurabi's death, Babylon struggled to maintain its dominance. Neighboring powers challenged its supremacy, and centuries of turmoil followed. At times Babylon was conquered. At times it lay in ruins. But each time the city rose again, rebuilt by new rulers who recognized its symbolic and strategic power. For all its struggles, Babylon refused to vanish. Its resilience would become part of its legend. By the 7th century BCE, the city was under the shadow of the mighty Assyrians, whose empire stretched across the Near East. The Assyrians were fierce warriors, masters of iron and siege engines, yet even they could not erase Babylon. The city endured as a center of culture, religion, and identity. When the Assyrians themselves fell, Babylon was ready to rise once more. It was under Nebuchadnezzar II, in the 6th century BCE, that Babylon reached its zenith. Nebuchadnezzar was not only a military conqueror, but also a builder of astonishing ambition. He expanded Babylon into one of the largest and most magnificent cities of the ancient world. Its walls stretched for miles, towering above the plains, so massive that later, writers claimed chariots could ride atop them. The Ishtar Gate, adorned with glazed blue bricks and images of lions, dragons, and bulls, proclaimed Babylon's glory to all who entered. The city was a marvel of urban planning, with temples, palaces, and canals that sustained its people. In its heart stood the ziggurat known as Etemenanki, a towering structure dedicated to Marduk, said to have inspired the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. It reached toward the heavens, symbolizing humanity's eternal desire to bridge the gap between earth and the divine. Babylon was not merely a city, it was a statement. It declared power, culture, and faith to the world. Legends spoke of the Hanging Gardens, said to have been built by Nebuchadnezzar for his queen, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. Though archaeologists still debate their existence, the gardens became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world in the imagination of later writers. Whether myth or reality, they embodied Babylon's identity, a place of wonder, where human creativity and ambition seemed limitless. But Babylon's greatness was not only material, it was intellectual. Babylonian astronomers charted the heavens, recording eclipses and planetary movements with remarkable precision. Their work laid the foundations for later Greek and Islamic science. Babylonian mathematicians developed systems of calculation that influenced trade, architecture, and timekeeping. Even in the midst of empire and conquest, the pursuit of knowledge flourished. Yet behind the grandeur lay tension. Babylon's power rested on conquest and tribute, and the city's wealth often masked unrest among subject peoples. Among them were the Israelites taken into exile after Nebuchadnezzar's campaigns in Judah. For them, Babylon became not a wonder, but a symbol of oppression. The rivers of Babylon, immortalized in Psalms, carried with them songs of longing for a lost homeland. In Jewish and later Christian tradition, Babylon would stand as a symbol of arrogance, decadence, and divine judgment. The empire's glory did not last. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia marched on Babylon. The city's defenses, so mighty, could not save it. Ancient accounts describe the Persians diverting the Euphrates and entering through the riverbed, overwhelming the city without a battle. Whether fact or embellished legend, the fall of Babylon was swift. Cyrus entered as a liberator, restoring religious practices and sending exiles home, including the Israelites. Babylon, once the master of empires, was now a jewel in another's crown. Though it remained an important city for centuries under Persian, Greek, and later empires, Babylon's greatness waned. Its temples fell into disrepair. Its people moved on. By the time of Alexander the Great, who dreamed of making Babylon his capital, the city was already fading. After his death, neglect and decay consumed it. The desert winds swept over its ruins. The once great metropolis became a memory, its bricks scattered, its name lingering only in stories and scripture. Yet Babylon never truly died. Its legacy shaped the world that followed. Hammurabi's laws inspired future systems of justice. Babylonian astronomy guided scholars for millennia. Its myths and stories wove themselves into the Bible, into Greek writings, into Islamic thought, and into the cultural imagination of later ages. In literature and art, Babylon became a symbol of pride, of beauty, of corruption, of human ambition. Even today, to speak of Babylon is to evoke a city that is more than ruins. It is an idea, both wondrous and ominous. The ruins of Babylon still stand in modern-day Iraq. Weathered by time, scarred by wars both ancient and recent, they remain a reminder of what once was. The Ishtar Gate, reconstructed in Berlin, shows the artistry of a people who dreamed in color and myth. The clay tablets, preserved in museums, whisper the thoughts of scribes who lived thousands of years ago. Babylon's story is not just the story of a city, it is the story of civilization itself, of human triumphs and human flaws, of ambition and downfall, of legacy and memory. Babylon rose, Babylon fell, but Babylon endures in every telling of its name. The story of Babylon is not complete without stepping into the streets of the city itself, imagining the life of its people. Beneath the shadow of towering ziggurats and vast palace walls, Babylon thrived with markets, workshops, and homes. Merchants hawked spices, textiles, and precious stones, carried on caravans from as far away as India and the Arabian Peninsula. The air carried the sound of hammers striking bronze, clay being shaped on wheels, and scribes etching lines of cuneiform into wet tablets. It was a city alive with both the noise of daily survival and the quiet hum of intellectual pursuit. The Babylonians were deeply religious, their worldview inseparable from the will of the gods. Chief among them was Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon, who according to myth defeated the primordial chaos monster Tiamat and established order in the universe. Each year, during the New Year festival known as Akitu, the king would humble himself before Marduk's statue, reaffirming his right to rule not by force alone, but through divine blessing. In this ritual, the king was stripped of his royal regalia, slapped by the high priest, and only after confessing his humility was he permitted to be restored. Such ceremonies reveal the paradox of Babylonian kingship, absolute in power, yet dependent on the approval of gods and priests. The temples of Babylon, like the great Esagila dedicated to Marduk, were more than places of worship. They were centers of administration, wealth and learning. Priests managed land, collected offerings, and recorded astronomical observations. The Babylonian priest astronomers became renowned for their systematic tracking of celestial movements. They identified constellations, predicted eclipses, and divided the heavens into 12 sections, the basis for the zodiac still used today. Their mathematical system, based on 60, gave us the division of hours into 60 minutes and minutes into 60 seconds. When we look at our clocks or trace horoscopes, we are, in some small way, inheriting Babylon. Life in Babylon was structured but not without hardship. Families lived in mud brick houses along narrow streets. The wealthy enjoyed multiple rooms and courtyards, while the poor crowded into modest dwellings. Women had defined rights under Hammurabi's code, including property rights and legal protections, though society remained patriarchal. Children were expected to obey and learn trades, while scribal schools trained the literate elite to master the complex cuneiform script. Education was rigorous, filled with copying proverbs and hymns, but it offered a path to influence within temple and palace administration. The grandeur of Babylon attracted both admiration and fear. For the Israelites exiled after Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Jerusalem, the city represented captivity and sorrow. Their psalms spoke of weeping by the rivers of Babylon, longing for Zion. Prophets denounced Babylon as a symbol of arrogance destined for destruction. In the book of Daniel, the story of the king's madness, of writing on the wall foretelling doom, cemented Babylon's place as a city whose pride invited divine judgment. Thus, Babylon entered not only the annals of history, but also the realm of moral lesson, becoming a warning told across generations. The Persian conquest under Cyrus the Great did not erase Babylon immediately. Cyrus respected the city's traditions, allowing temples to function and even presenting himself as chosen by Marduk. Babylon remained a key administrative hub in the Persian Empire, its scholars continuing to produce knowledge, its priests maintaining rituals. But its political independence was gone, and with it, the aura of unrivaled dominance. Centuries later, Alexander the Great marched triumphantly into Babylon. Unlike so many conquerors before him, Alexander saw the city not as a trophy to be plundered, but as a future capital for his empire. He planned to restore its temples, revive its canals, and make Babylon the center of a world united under his banner. But Alexander's untimely death in 323 BCE left those dreams unfinished. His successors quarreled, and Babylon once again was neglected. Populations dwindled as new cities like Seleucia rose nearby. The great walls crumbled, canals silted up. By the time Roman travelers recorded their impressions centuries later, Babylon was a shadow of itself. As the city fell silent, its reputation grew louder in the cultural imagination. In Jewish apocalyptic writings, Babylon became a cipher for oppressive empires, later applied to Rome and beyond. In the Christian Book of Revelation, Babylon the Great was described as a harlot drunk with the blood of saints, a city destined to fall under God's wrath. In Islamic tradition too, Babylon held a place linked to tales of angels and forbidden knowledge. What had once been a real city transformed into a symbol of human pride, corruption, and downfall. Archaeology, centuries later, brought the ruins of Babylon back into the light. Excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries uncovered the foundations of its walls, the remnants of palaces, and countless tablets that revealed its language and lore. The Ishtar Gate, reconstructed in a Berlin museum, astonishes visitors with its deep blue bricks and radiant animal reliefs, offering a glimpse of the city's former majesty. These discoveries confirmed what ancient writers had hinted, that Babylon was not myth, but monumental reality, a city where human ambition touched the sky. In the modern world, Babylon's name continues to resonate. To call a place Babylon is to invoke wealth and power, but also corruption and excess. Musicians, poets, and political movements have used the term to describe oppressive systems, distant empires, or decadent societies. The ruins near Hillah in Iraq, though scarred by conflict and restoration attempts, remain a physical reminder of a story that belongs to all humanity. The rise and fall of Babylon is more than the tale of a city. It is the pattern of empires, birth, glory, decline, and memory. It shows us how power can create wonders, how knowledge can transcend centuries, and how arrogance can lead to ruin. The Euphrates still flows, as it did when Hammurabi issued his laws and Nebuchadnezzar built his towers. Time has swept away Babylon's glory, but the lessons it left endure. When we speak of Babylon, we speak of the human story itself, of brilliance and ambition, of resilience and folly. It was a city of wonders, a city of shadows, a city whose name still carries both awe and warning. Babylon rose from the dust, and to dust it returned. Yet in that rise and fall lies the essence of civilization, fragile, fleeting, but unforgettable. The laws of Hammurabi stand as one of the earliest surviving attempts to shape society with written words. Carved into a basalt stele nearly 8 feet tall, they were placed in public view, a declaration that order and justice were not hidden in the mind of the king but available for all to see. The laws themselves reveal the fabric of Babylonian life. They set penalties for theft, for false accusations, for adultery, for negligence. Builders who constructed unsafe houses that collapsed were to be punished, sometimes by death. Merchants who cheated in trade faced strict retribution. Physicians whose treatments failed could lose their hands, while shepherds and farmers had their obligations clearly spelled out. Some punishments were harsh, others surprisingly balanced, but together they showed a society deeply concerned with stability and fairness. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth was more than a phrase. It was the principle that justice should be proportionate, neither cruelly excessive nor dangerously lenient. The code also reveals the layers of Babylonian society. Different penalties were assigned depending on whether one harmed a noble, a commoner, or a slave. Women were given certain protections, especially in marriage and inheritance, though their rights were still bound by patriarchal norms. In these laws we see both the beginnings of universal justice and the clear divisions of class that marked ancient civilizations. Babylon was not a utopia, but it was a society that sought to impose order in a chaotic world. Religion bound Babylon together as tightly as law. The gods were not distant abstractions but immediate powers who could bring prosperity or disaster. The daily rhythm of the city was punctuated by offerings, sacrifices, and prayers. Temples dominated the skyline, not only as places of worship, but as treasuries and centers of influence. The priests held great authority, interpreting omens, advising kings, and preserving knowledge. Divination was a crucial part of decision-making. The liver of a sacrificed animal might reveal whether to march into battle, and the stars themselves were read as the writing of the gods. To the Babylonians, the cosmos was a living text, and their duty was to interpret it. Festivals brought moments of joy and renewal. During Akitu, the New Year celebration, the city came alive with processions, music, and ritual dramas reenacting the victory of Marduk over chaos. Statues of gods were carried through the streets, reminding the people of the divine order sustaining their world. For the citizens, these moments reaffirmed their identity as Babylonians, chosen of Marduk, living at the center of the world. The city itself was a marvel. Babylon's walls, according to later accounts, were so wide that chariots could race upon them. The Ishtar Gate, decorated with images of lions, bulls, and dragons, gleamed with blue-glazed bricks, a dazzling sight for travelers who approached the city. Beyond it stretched the processional way, lined with reliefs of lions symbolizing the goddess Ishtar, leading to the heart of the city, where the ziggurat rose. Itemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, towered into the sky, a stairway for the gods, perhaps inspiring later tales of the Tower of Babel. Whether fact or embellished memory, the accounts agree. Babylon's scale and beauty were unmatched in its age. Even in daily life, the city reflected sophistication. Canals brought water to irrigate fields and feed gardens. Houses of brick lined narrow streets, their roofs flat and sometimes used as additional living space. In the markets, one could find dates, barley, sesame oil, and wool, alongside luxury goods from distant lands. Artisans produced jewelry, pottery, and tools. Storytellers recited epics, including the great tale of Gilgamesh, preserved and copied long after its Sumerian origins. Life was not easy. Disease, famine, and war always threatened, but it was rich with culture and connection. Nebuchadnezzar's empire, however, was built not only on glory but on conquest. His armies expanded Babylonian influence across Mesopotamia and beyond. The capture of Jerusalem in 586 BCE and the exile of the Jewish elite became one of the defining moments in biblical history. To the exiles, Babylon represented both punishment and despair. Yet within their sorrow, they preserved their traditions, compiled their scriptures, and reimagined their identity. Ironically, Babylonians' attempt to assimilate them ensured the survival of a faith that would influence billions in centuries to come. When Cyrus the Great approached Babylon, the empire was weary. Though the walls seemed impregnable, the people within were divided. Cyrus presented himself not as a destroyer but as a liberator. His famous cylinder, inscribed in cuneiform, declared that he had been chosen by Marduk to restore order and return displaced peoples to their homes. For many Babylonians, this message resonated. The city fell without the expected resistance, and Babylon's conqueror entered not as a marauder, but as a king honoring its traditions. Still, the independence of Babylon was gone. Under Persian rule, the city remained important, but its days as the unrivaled center of the world were finished. Centuries later, Alexander's arrival briefly rekindled its hope for renewal, but his death turned that dream to ashes. The Seleucid kings founded new cities, drawing people away. The canals that had sustained Babylon's fields clogged with silt, and the fertile lands turned barren. Slowly the mighty city emptied. Its walls crumbled, its temples fell silent, and the once great metropolis returned to dust. Yet the memory of Babylon endured, magnified by myth. For the Israelites, it was the archetype of exile. For Christians, it was the symbol of worldly corruption, doomed to divine judgment. For poets and prophets alike, Babylon became more than a place. It became a warning. The proud city that sought to reach the heavens had fallen into silence, a reminder that no empire lasts forever. Archaeologists uncovered Babylon's story piece by piece. Clay tablets revealed records of trade, contracts, and astronomy. Reliefs and foundations gave shape to its monuments. The Ishtar Gate, painstakingly reconstructed in a Berlin museum, allowed the modern world to see the artistry of Babylonian craftsmen. In these discoveries, the city came alive again, not as myth alone, but as a real place where people lived, dreamed, and struggled. Today, the ruins of Babylon stand as both heritage and caution. Visitors walk among the remnants of palaces and walls, imagining the grandeur that once defined them. Though scarred by time, by modern conflict, and by attempts at reconstruction, they remain a testament to the resilience of history. Babylon's story speaks across the ages, that human ambition can create wonders, that knowledge can endure even when empires fall, and that pride unchecked can bring even the mightiest to ruin. Babylon was not merely a city, it was a mirror of humanity itself, its brilliance and its blindness, its creativity and its cruelty. To study Babylon is to study ourselves, for in its rise and fall lies the eternal rhythm of civilization. Babylon rose from the dust, and into the dust it returned. Yet as long as its name is spoken, Babylon lives. The daily life of Babylon's people was as vital to its legacy as its walls and temples. Archaeological records and ancient texts reveal a society both practical and imaginative. Food was central to community life, and the fertile fields around the city, enriched by the Euphrates, provided dates, barley, wheat, and sesame. Dates in particular were a staple, eaten fresh, dried, or brewed into a kind of wine. Barley was ground into flour for bread, while beer, thick and nourishing, was a common drink for both rich and poor. Markets bustled with vendors offering garlic, onions, lentils, fish from the river, and mutton from the surrounding plains. Cooking was often done in clay ovens, and feasts during festivals could include roasted meats seasoned with herbs that had traveled far along trade routes. Clothing in Babylon reflected both function and status. The heat of Mesopotamia demanded light garments. Men often wore simple tunics of wool or linen, while women's attire was more elaborate, with robes, shawls, and sometimes intricate head coverings. Jewelry was popular among both sexes. Rings, earrings, and amulets carved from lapis lazuli or carnelian, gleamed in the sun. These adornments were not merely decorative, but often carried symbolic meaning, believed to offer protection or favor from the gods. Hairstyles too mattered. Men might curl their beards, while women braided their hair with ribbons or beads. In these details, we glimpse a society as concerned with beauty and identity as any in later ages. Music and entertainment enlivened the city. Harps, lyres, and flutes accompanied religious ceremonies, while drums and rattles set the rhythm for festivals. Music was not only for worship, but for celebration, and the echoes of Babylonian melodies likely drifted through courtyards and streets during banquets and gatherings. Children played with clay figurines and toys, while adults engaged in board games, predecessors to the games that continue to captivate us today. These small moments of joy and play humanize Babylon, reminding us that behind the grand monuments lived people who laughed, sang, and dreamed. Babylon's myths were as important as its daily routines. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, told of Marduk's triumph over Tiamat, the goddess of chaos. From her divided body, he formed heaven and earth, establishing order. Humanity, the story declared, was fashioned from the blood of a defeated god, created to serve the divine. Such myths reinforced the Babylonian worldview. The cosmos was born from struggle, sustained by the gods, and dependent on human devotion. The annual reenactments of these stories during festivals bound the people to their faith and to their city. Another story preserved in Babylon was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Though its roots lay in earlier Sumerian traditions, Babylonian scribes copied and preserved it. In its tale of a hero's quest for immortality, his friendship with Enkidu, and his encounter with the flood survivor Utnapishtim, echoes of universal themes resound. Gilgamesh's search for meaning and his final realization that mortality is inescapable spoke across centuries. Through Babylon, this epic reached later cultures, influencing stories from Greek myths to biblical narratives. Science and religion intertwined in Babylonian thought. Astronomers carefully recorded the movements of stars and planets, believing they revealed the will of the gods. Yet in their quest to interpret omens, they achieved remarkable precision. They predicted eclipses, tracked the synodic cycles of Venus, and divided the sky into constellations that still bear their legacy. Their sexagesimal system, based on the number 60, made calculations flexible and enduring. It gave us the geometry of circles, the division of time, and mathematical concepts that reached the Greeks and beyond. The Babylonians may have read the heavens for signs, but in doing so they laid the groundwork for astronomy and mathematics as sciences. Warfare was another thread woven into Babylon's story. Armies marched under banners, with archers, spearmen, and chariots forming the core of their strength. Siege warfare was a brutal necessity, as cities across Mesopotamia were fortified with thick walls. Babylon itself was a fortress, but its armies, like its rulers, waxed and waned with fortune. Victory brought tribute and captives, swelling the city with wealth. Defeat brought devastation, exile, and rebuilding. Through it all, Babylon endured, absorbing new peoples and new influences, a city both conqueror and conquered. The conquest of Cyrus and the later presence of Alexander brought Babylon into dialogue with new empires, embedding it in the fabric of global history. Greek writers described its wonders with awe, though often with embellishment. Roman authors looked back at it as a relic of an older, mysterious world. For medieval scholars, Babylon remained a place of fascination, its name invoked in religious texts and legends. To them, it was a city of sin, a place where humanity's pride had reached for heaven and fallen into ruin. The rediscovery of Babylon in modern times rekindled its allure. When European explorers and archaeologists began to uncover its remains in the 19th century, the ancient city stepped once again into the world's imagination. Thousands of clay tablets were found, preserving not only laws and contracts, but also prayers, myths, and astronomical records. Each tablet became a voice from the past, a fragment of the lives lived in a city that had seemed lost to time. The reconstruction of the Ishtar Gate in Berlin gave modern eyes a chance to behold its splendor, though separated from the land that gave it birth. In contemporary culture, Babylon has become a metaphor, For some, it represents imperial power, wealth, and innovation. For others, it is the symbol of oppression, excess, and corruption. In reggae and Rastafarian tradition, Babylon became shorthand for oppressive systems of colonialism and control. In literature and film, it often appears as the archetype of a fallen empire, a reminder of human hubris. Politicians and preachers alike have invoked its name, whether to warn against decadence or to critique domination. Babylon lives on, not just in ruins, but in language, ideology, and imagination. The ruins in Iraq, though fragile, are a testament to this enduring presence. The Euphrates still flows by their side, as it did when Hammurabi ruled and Nebuchadnezzar dreamed. Standing among the remnants of walls and temples, one can almost hear the echoes of markets, the chants of priests, the music of festivals, and the cries of conquest. The dust of Babylon carries stories of triumph and tragedy, knowledge and folly. It speaks not only of what once was, but of what always will be, the rise and fall of human ambition. Babylon's story is not simply ancient history. It is a mirror held up to every civilization. It shows how power can build wonders, how law can bind communities, how faith can inspire, and how arrogance can destroy. Its rise was fueled by vision and determination. Its fall was inevitable, a pattern repeated in Rome, in empires of the East and West, and perhaps in the societies of today. Babylon whispers to us still, no empire is eternal, but the ideas born within its walls may outlive stone and mortar. In the end, Babylon's true greatness lies not in its ruins but in its legacy. Its laws, myths, science, and symbolism ripple through time. Its name endures in scripture, in culture, in memory. Babylon rose from obscurity to dominate the ancient world. It fell into silence, yet its voice has never ceased. The city is gone, but the idea remains, a reminder of both the heights humanity can reach and the depths to which it can fall.